Okay everyone, so what we're going to do is we're going to add some texture to our painted metal. So here, I've got a bunch of textures that I got from cgtextures.com, and basically we're going to look for one that has some large scale values. We want to avoid using ones that have too many details like those, and basically we're going to stick with something like this. Maybe let's try to use this one. This one doesn't seem to have too much contrast and all the details seem to be fairly weak, but it has some nice soft gradients that we're gonna need. So I'll go and open this texture in Photoshop, and now I'll simply go and press Ctrl A to select the whole image, and I'll press Ctrl C to copy it. Now I'll press Ctrl V to paste it above the paint gray layer. Okay, and now I'll go to Edit, Free Transform, and I'll try to resize this image down to improve its quality and make it fit within the canvas. So I'll go and zoom out, and now I'll simply press this chain icon here to maintain the proportions of the image, and now I'll resize it maybe down to 60%. Maybe let's drop it down to 50. Okay. And now I'll simply drag those edge points to adjust it completely to the canvas. Okay, now let's maybe adjust its position a bit, and let's see which areas of this image will fit the best. Okay, let's commit. Now the thing I don't like about this texture is that it has some very large scratches, and they seem to be much larger than what they should be on the door of this size. So we'll have to remove them. So I'll go to Filter, Blur, Surface Blur, and by default you can see that it removes quite a lot of detail, leaving only those soft gradients. And maybe I'll go and adjust the sliders a little bit more, basically just to give it a bit more sharpness. Okay, that seems to work. And now that we have filtered our texture, it seems to look a lot better. Okay, so now let's also remove those scratches here. So what I'm going to do is I'll go and use the Clone Stamp tool. And now simply press Alt and then click on some area of the image to sample that part. And also I'll go and make sure that current layer is selected so that we don't sample from other layers of the image. And then I'll simply go and paint those scratches away. Okay, now let's go and let's set this layer to overlay. And now when I toggle it on and off, you can see that it has quite a big impact on the way our texture looks. It adds some color variation, also some areas that look like dirt, and makes some areas look cleaner. So using those subtle overlays is a very good place to start. Okay, now maybe let's go and let's rename this layer. So I'll call it Painted Metal Overlay. Okay. And now let's go and paint some additional color variation using Photoshop's brushes. If I go and select the brush tool, and I click here, you'll see that I made a couple of brushes that you can use to texture this door. And this whole set of brushes is called Industrial Door Brushes, and you'll be able to find it in the Projects folder. Right, so now I'm going to go and select this soft round brush. And I'll go and press the bracket key a couple of times to increase its size. Okay. Now I'll go and make a new layer. And I will change the color of this brush to something like maybe dark brown. Maybe something like this. Okay. Now I'll go and use my tablet to paint in some very soft large-scale values along the edges of the door and maybe those metal panels. So I'll go and paint it like this. Using some very soft strokes, I'll try to vary them in size and intensity. Okay, I'll do the same here. I'll pretty much go very randomly. Maybe let's go and add some to the top. Okay, and now I'll go and do the same, but this time I'll go and do this with the eraser brush to remove the unwanted details. So I'll go and select the eraser brush, and now I'll simply increase the brush size to something very big as well, maybe something like this, and I'll simply go and start erasing. And I'll try to erase from the center of those door panels. So I'll just keep going and make sure that we only have some color information around the edges of multiple elements, like this. Okay, maybe let's go and remove some of those bits on the top as well. Okay. Now I'll go and remove some here to make it look like the dirt is actually not overlapping multiple elements. Alright. And now I'll go and set this layer to color burn. Okay. Now as you can see, this not only makes things darker, but also blows up some colors in the layer below. Now I'm going to reduce the opacity of this layer down to something maybe like this. And because right now we are focusing on the very large shapes, you want to keep everything very, very supple. And as you can see, even with low opacity, it adds a bit more depth to our texture. Now let's go and let's rename this layer to maybe dark, soft values. Okay. Right, so what we're going to do next is we're going to add some lighter values as well. Maybe we're going to add them in the middle of the door. So I'll create a new layer. And now I'll simply go and change the color of this brush to white. And I'll simply go and select the brush and simply paint in some white strokes here and there. And I'll simply try to brighten up the middle of the door panels. Then I'll go and add some subtle strokes to the frames. And then maybe I'll resize my brush down and I'll add some values here to those metal panels. And doing this basically adds a little bit more depth to our texture. So let's just keep going. Maybe let's add some highlights to those Windows frames. Maybe some to those trims as well. And some to those frames. Right, so now let's toggle this layer off. And again, it seems like it has quite a big impact. So I'll go and change the blending mode of this layer to overlay. And I'll simply drop the opacity down a little bit. Okay, so let's change the name of this layer to maybe light, soft values. And I'll go and group all those layers together into a painted metal group. Okay, now before we finish, maybe let's make some adjustments to the colors of our door. So first, I think I'm gonna go and adjust the brightness of our painted metal. So I'll open up this group, and I'll go and adjust the brightness of this layer here. So let's maybe increase it to something like this. Okay. And now maybe let's go and let's make the brushed metal slightly darker. So once again, let's go to Image Adjustments, Brightness Contrast, and let's drop it down a bit, maybe like this. Okay. Now we can also go and add some large scale values to the brushed metal. And there's a quick tip on how we can do that. So if I go and use the blending options and go to Pattern Overlay, you'll see that we have this blue pattern here. So let's make it bigger by dragging this slider. I'll make it really big, maybe something like this. And now I'll go and change this layer to Overlay. Okay. And now as you can see, it looks like we've got some faked reflections. Of course, we don't want this effect to be too strong, so I'll go and reduce the opacity of this layer down to maybe 20. Okay. And now when I toggle this on and off, you can see that it has some very subtle effect. So you can either paint in some variation using your brushes, or you can overlay some pre-made Photoshop patterns. Right, so at this point we're pretty much done here. So what we have to do next is we have to add some details. But first I'll go ahead and maybe add some highlights to this glass. So I'll skip ahead and I'll paint some very soft strokes once again. And then after the break we'll start adding some smaller details.